Well, grace to you and peace from God our Father and our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. By 1979, things had really fallen apart. That's how Stephen spoke to Larry Moeller, and Larry records in his book entitled The Query, some of which many of you are reading. This was a difficult time, said Stephen. I was completely busted, mentally, spiritually. Nothing was going the way it was supposed to. I wasn't in control. I moved out and into an apartment. After 17 years of marriage, a disastrous separation. All of that because of one question. One question that Larry asked, can you tell me about the hope that lives inside of you? That single question had the power to force out a story from Stephen's life. Larry asked people over and over that question, and over stories were told. Stephen went on. I went back to rock and roll and to drinking and a much more goer lifestyle. Were there women, Larry asked? Oh yeah, there were other women. We were separated, and I was one step from being free. Everybody has a story, right? I was once told that the best way for you to strike up a conversation with somebody is to ask that person about the one thing they know better than anything else, themselves. People have a story. And they know the details of that story better than anything else, the good and the bad. And it just might be that they will tell even a stranger their story. Which is one reason why I love this passage from St. John, the 12th chapter that we heard read a few moments ago, Mary. Do you think Mary has a story? Now, this Mary is not Mary, the mother of Jesus. This is not Mary Magdalene. This is Mary, the sister to Martha and to Lazarus. You have to believe that she has a great story to tell. Maybe part of Mary's story is a bit sordid. In the Gospel of St. Luke, Luke tells a story about a woman who has a rather interesting past, who comes to Jesus and falls at his feet, disturbs a dinner party, and she weeps and she cleans Jesus' feet with her tears and wipes his feet with her hair. Is this the same story? Is this the same Mary? I mean, if it is, then most certainly this woman, Mary, had a promiscuous past. The whole town, we're told in St. Luke, knew that she was a sinner. A little bit later in the Gospel of Luke, we're told that Mary and her sister Martha would hang out with Jesus, but Martha would be the one who would serve the dinner and work hard at it while Mary sat at the feet of Jesus and listened to him. Obviously, this is the same Mary. For in our story from the Gospel of John today, there is Mary again, sitting at the feet of Jesus, which by the way just did not happen in that first century. Women did not sit at the feet of the rabbi. That's where the men sat. So that would tell you right off that Jesus is very radical in who he welcomes into his inner circle. And Mary is rather radical herself in breaking the rules in order to show devotion to Jesus. So Mary has a story to tell. And now, in Gospel of St. John, the story gets amplified a little bit. Now, if we would have read the passages that just preceded this, in chapter 11, we would have heard the story about Mary's brother, Lazarus, being very sick, and Jesus doesn't get to him in time, he dies. And so when he shows up, when Jesus comes to the tomb, it's like Mary and Martha say, why are you here? You should have come earlier. Don't even bother going to the grave. But Jesus goes to the grave and he walks into the tomb and he pulls Lazarus out. You have to believe this is the crowning achievement to Mary's story. To be able to say, he raised my brother. You won't believe, he raised my brother from the grave. Everybody has a story, right? Stephen went on to Larry Muller. Then one night, the Lord got my attention with a 2x4. Do you know about 2x4s? The Lord dropped me to my knees in my living room one night, and it seemed like I could hear him saying, "You messed up pretty bad." That got my attention. Of course, I didn't need any convincing. I had messed things up for sure. People can usually tell you about the turning points in their life. Even non-religious people can tell you about the moments when something caught their attention, when they woke up, when the path that they were traveling got turned around somehow. And non-religious people might call these aha moments. But here at Christ Lutheran Church, we call these Kairos moments. Now in the Bible there are two ways to tell time. One is chronologically, or chronos. And for this type of timekeeping, you need a calendar or a watch or a sundial. It's the systematic unfolding of time. Seconds into minutes, minutes into hours, hours into days, and days into weeks, and so on and so forth. The other way to mark time is called Kairos. This is God-centered time. Kairos refers to those times in our lives when God shows up. Kairos means that you are aware that God is doing something. God is present. Every Christian has a Kairos moment, and maybe many. Kairos moments happen when people come to faith, or when people are invited to go deeper into their faith than they had before, or when God invites people into a big project, into a ministry. If you ask a Christian to tell you their faith story, essentially what you're asking them is to tell you their Kairos stories. Here's the tricky thing. Some people have never been asked to tell their faith story. They might be in a position never to really articulate how it is that God has shown up, how God has done God's Kairos moments. And they might even, at first blush, think that they don't have much of a story to tell. And if they do, after all, it's a personal thing. It's private, not something to be shared. That's one side of the spectrum. On the other side of the Kairos telling spectrum are those who are not reluctant to tell you about their Kairos moments. They're free to tell you over and over and over and over again. You see them coming and you kind of want to get out of their way because you've heard these stories before. Those who are on the left side of the Kairos telling spectrum we call introverts, or the frozen chosen. Those on the right side we call extroverts, or televangelists. Where are you on that spectrum? Are you on the far ends of either way, or are you someplace in the middle? But everyone has a story to tell, right? And for those who have Kairos moments dotted throughout their history, they find themselves, well, sitting here in worship. I mean, because this is the normal response to one for whom God has shown up in their life. Stephen said to Larry, "Once I asked Christ back into my life, we went to church every Sunday." He said, we've been very faithful being in church ever since. Why do we go to church? Why do we worship? Because God is worthy of our worship. And so people like Stephen, for whom God has shown up in a powerful way, well, they simply recognize this is the only place to be. This is the place where we're supposed to be about thanking, praising, serving, and obeying God. Those words, by the way, come from Martin Luther as he expressed in the first article of the Apostles' Creed in the Small Catechism, what is our job? What is our role? What do we do when God becomes real? We thank, praise, serve, and obey Him. And that's what Mary was doing for Jesus. I hope you caught, and maybe even were a little bit disturbed by what Mary did. It was a rather excessive act. The way John tells us, she takes this container of perfume, very expensive perfume, and pours it all over Jesus' feet. Now, in today's value, it would be like 1 ounce of a bottle of Clyde Christian No. 1 Imperial Majesty perfume. I'm sure some of you women have this at home. It costs a little over $100,000 a bottle. I mean, where did Mary get this? Where did Mary come up with the money for this very expensive perfume? Shouldn't she have, I don't know, used the money on something a little bit more practical? Now, if you're thinking those questions, you're not alone. Judas was asking those questions too. But Jesus brushes aside Judas's question as if to say, you know what, Mary right now is doing the right thing. It's what everyone else ought to be doing. She is giving to Jesus her very best. She is blessing Jesus with everything she has. And I love the way that John then amplifies the story when he says, and the fragrance of this perfume filled the entire room. There's kind of a challenge in that, isn't there? The challenge is, do those who have a Kairos moment in their lives, do those for whom God has shown up and brought salvation, or hope, or peace, or guidance, or inspiration, have those people given God their very best? Do Christians who worship God extravagantly? That is, giving God our very best time, giving God the very best of our attention, giving God the very best of our money, giving God the very best of our skills. Do we do that? I notice that sometimes people who do experience God's presence in profound ways in their lives, after a period of time, they sort of cool off. And things like worship become less a priority in their life. It really has to be a heart thing. Jesus said, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Well, Mary's heart was firmly placed in her adoration of Jesus. She adores Jesus. She sees Jesus as somebody who understands her, not the way that other people might understand her, but the right way, the true way. She sees in Jesus somebody who has the mysteries of God and is able to speak about God in such a way that her heart comes alive. She's experienced in Jesus somebody who has come at the most critical moments of her life and been the answer to her greatest concerns and questions. Theologians, they've read this story that we just read a few moments ago, and they get a little concerned because they notice that Mary's actions are, well, a bit over the top. And she is, after all, sitting at the feet of Jesus. No woman would have done that. And then she lets her hair down. Certainly an act only reserved for a woman, a wife, with her husband. And so they wondered, is there something more going on in this story? Well, there is. Mary is in love with her Lord. How often do you say that? How often do you describe your relationship with Jesus as a love relationship, an act of love? I mean, do you come to worship as a way to extravagantly show your love for God? I mean, we talk about believing in God and trusting God and having faith in God. We talk about theology and doctrine and dogma every so often, but do we use the love language when we describe our relationship with God? Of course, Jesus, like he always does, takes this moment with Mary and he provides a bigger picture. He kind of turns things around a little bit. I mean, what was intended as Mary devoting herself to Jesus, Jesus actually then points to his death. That's Jesus for you. Always taking what we give him and then giving himself back to us. In 6 short days from this moment in John, Jesus would go to the cross, and he would die for Mary, and for you, and for me. And because he died, Mary gets new life. And so do you, so do we. Talk about a Kairos moment. Do you remember the first time in your life when the gift of Jesus' death meant something to you? Do you remember that awakening moment when you understood that he died for you? He took your place. He gave you now life in his death, and salvation is yours. John Wesley, the founder of the Methodist Church, wrote of that moment in his life that he felt his heart grow strangely warmer inside of him. Can you remember that experience? Is that how it is for you, that your heart has a tendency to skip a beat? Do you still respond with that deep love and devotion? As Larry and Stephen said goodbye at the airport, Stephen grabbed Larry's arm and held on, and he looked into his eyes just for a moment, and he said, I've never told anybody my story before. May the story of God in you, may the Kairos moments when God has shown up in your life, invited you to go deeper, given you a greater understanding of God's kingdom in the world, when God has brought hope into your life and peace and forgiveness and joy, may you be willing to tell that story with joy. May the story be gracious as it gives God all the credit, and may it be holy so that you invite others to be able to share the hope that lies within them as well. And in telling this story, may you be drawn to extravagantly love the God who extravagantly loves you, and in doing so, may you live with unshakable hope. Amen. The peace of the Lord be with you always. Thank you. I invite you to rise and share the peace of Christ with those who are near you.